Good evening, everyone, and thank you for tuning in with me this Monday. I think I need to stop something here. Thank you for tuning in with me this Monday evening. This is the first time I'm doing this on my laptop, and so the camera is terrible. But in any case, I just wanted to talk briefly, I don't have long, about child sexual abuse and sexual abuse of women here in the Cayman Islands. And I have been meaning to talk about this for quite a long time, very, very long time. And I keep putting it off, honestly, because something is always coming up, but it is something that needs to be discussed, and I can't put it off anymore. And a recent case, I just want to make sure that I am recording here properly, because I have never used this on my computer. It seems to work better on your phone, but I have never. I read a case this past week. It was discussed on some other media sources and online, and it reminded me of why it was necessary for me to discuss this topic. And it seems every month, almost every month for a number of years, or every so often, there's a case being reported in the media of child sexual molestation. And by child, that is under the age of 16, because the age of 16 is consent in the Cayman Islands, and if a child is under that age, they cannot give consent. And so I don't know if our MPs read these cases when they are reported in the media. I know our Chief Justice and the Grand Court opening for this year, I can't remember if it was last year also, but I know she mentioned, and I know the Director of Public Prosecution made mention of concerns with these cases. Our Police Commissioner, Mr. Walton, did a press release some months ago and made mention of the number of cases that they are dealing with, and I didn't note down specifics, because it's very discouraging to note these specifics in our islands. However, it is still, on the other hand, encouraging to know that law enforcement on a whole, and that does include the judiciary, the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service, and the DPP's office, are seeing more of these cases and are prosecuting more of these cases. And as we can see, more of these cases are being closed with convictions. And so that is very encouraging. For me, that means authorities are getting more serious in pursuing these cases. It also means that the public is coming forward more and more often as time goes by with reporting these cases as they're happening. No longer are, I can't say no longer, but more often than not, it seems now that these things are being swept under the rug any longer. And they should not be. They should be brought to the attention of the authorities. Children should be believed. With the growth of our population, we have, I think the last count was over 100 different nationalities here in the Cayman Islands. And that brings in questionable types of persons coming to our islands and bringing certain types of behaviors and thinking with them. But we also have our own homegrown persons who are close to children and roles of responsibility and trust, who are breaching that responsibility and breaching that trust. And so we want to take accord of all of this and focus on this, because this is such a serious topic for me. It really is something I didn't want to broach, but it has to be broached. I have for quite a long time spoken to authorities about the sentencing guidelines for child sexual abuse and sexual offenses against women. Everyone knows that drugs and guns and those like offenses are more targeted. Authorities, I shouldn't say are more focused on those, but they draw bigger sentences. And I do not believe wholeheartedly, as is displayed publicly and by some of the sentences that we see received by these perpetrators, these rapists, these pedophiles, these abusers, is good enough. These acts, these behaviors, these rapes, they destroy children's lives. They destroy women's especially lives. They destroy the victims' lives, the survivors' lives. Our children are damaged forever when they are sexually abused. If even just touching, if even just whispering words, our children are disturbed and destroyed forever. And we must be a dominating force here in the Cayman Islands, as small as we are, and still have the ability to form our own laws, take this by the bullhorns. We can use sentencing guidelines from, or I would call it adopted country, the UK. But I honestly think we need to do more here on the ground in the Cayman Islands. We really, really do. Because when we see someone sexually penetrating and assaulting a child or a woman against their will, or an elderly person, or even a man against their will, and receiving time for good behavior, time for curfew, time because a social inquiry report says that it's a first offense, and whatever those reports say, it is so disheartening. It is so discouraging that you want to scream. You just want to go on the steps of the government building. You just want to go to the parliamentarians and you just want to shake everyone and say, what are you guys going to do about this? We have to protect our children. We need to read the human rights of the Cayman Islands. We need to read the international standards of human rights. We have to set precedents. Government, this is no longer acceptable. I don't know how many of you do not read these cases. You may not even want to deal with it and address it. Minister of Social Development, Honorable Premier and Deputy Premier, Honorable Leader of Government of the Opposition and Deputy Leader of the Opposition. Everything else that you guys are taking in accord, you have to take this issue in accord. This is a dilemma. There's another word I'm looking for that I can't find it right now, but let me tell you, it is not fair, it is not right to our children. And this sexual, what is it called again? That another advocate, local advocate, has been advocating for many, many, sexual offenders registry. We need something like this. You see the Caribbean has to change the Caribbean mentality. has to change. Because the Caribbean people do not want to face the facts that many of our trusted family members and friends are sexual predators. Many politicians are sexual predators. Pedophile is a mild word for them. They are predators. They destroy children's lives. Let me tell you, in some countries, they have what is called child tourism, child sex tourism, where people go to these countries. And I believe we had a case here. It's over now. Where these two persons brought in these two persons and they had this baby. And I believe they bought that baby for that purpose. That is my opinion, my personal view. And some of these countries, I won't name countries, but there are many, many countries in this world who promote sexual activity with children. Not just children under 16, but children under 10. Babies. We see in the States, they just broke a ring. In Florida. Was it Florida? I can't remember. I believe it was Florida, yes. No, I can't remember. I saved the article. But they just broke up a ring of people who were engaged in child sexual rape, babies. So parents, caregivers, some of you mothers are despicable to want to hide sexual abuse of your children. Because it's your husband, it's your brother, when I was a guardian ad litem in Florida, my first case was with two little girls, and their parents were both on meth. And I remember there was concern that the father was touching one of them while he was under the influence of the drugs. And those two young ladies were taken from their homes. A guardian ad litem is someone that has to go through a rigorous training through the courts of the city. And then that court assigns you as a guardian ad litem. Basically, you are the voice of the abused child. You can be a guardian ad litem of our seniors also. And the guardian ad litem is like a lawyer, a parent, social services, a teacher, everything in one on behalf of a child. And my second case was worse, very, very heartbreaking. It was an African-American family, and the mother was a Christian. And the father had been recently released from jail. And the father was molesting the older daughter. And eventually his attention started to turn to the younger daughter. And it was my job to intervene and try to get that situation sorted out. The young lady was so afraid. She was so talented. She was very good in sports. She was very smart. I don't know how she did it in school. But the mother did nothing. The mother went to church and talked to the pastor and tried to, just tried to resolve it in church. Because the shame of having the father known to be doing this, and God gave everyone a gift to specialize in a certain area, professional area. That's why we have counselors. The pastors is not the all 100% saviors. Many pastors have no clue what to do in these situations. They just tell you to pray and they pray with you, but they're not professional persons trained to deal with these situations. So we have to give our children a fighting chance. The government of the Cayman Islands, MPs, with all that you present to the House over and over and over, why isn't no one saying we have to change the penal code with the sentencing guidelines? and the sentencing guidelines for these types of offenses. Guys, I want to read the story that I saw in the news last week, but these stories, I don't know, the DPP's office need to have specialized training prosecutors for these types of offenses. That is all they're focusing on. That is their specialty area. One or two prosecutors for those types of offenses. We have to have a judge and a magistrate for these types of offenses, strictly only. Strictly. We have to have a department within the RCIPS, not CID, that deals with everything criminal. We have to have, there's officers in there that are trained for these types of cases, but they have to deal with other types of criminal offenses. We want specialized, trained individuals for these types of cases. That's what the Cayman Islands need. As developed as we are, as evolved as we are, as wealthy as we are, that we have such a predominant number of cases before the courts on such a regular basis, we need better protection for our children. We need better protection for our women and our seniors, and anyone who has been sexually assaulted, forced against their will to engage in sexual acts of any type, or any touching of any type, where they did not give consent. And children under 16 by law is not considered able to give consent. So we need, I'm just going to look at some of the notes that I have here. We need judges and magistrates who will not be respectfully, no prejudice against the court, no slight against the courts. We can't take into account some of the mitigating circumstances that I hear some of these court cases put forward to the judges and the magistrates, or the judges and the magistrates say that they're going to take into consideration. I heard another host this morning saying that these types of offenders should be, I wouldn't even call them offenders, rapists, should have to be subjected to mandatory counseling. Therapy, actually, because this is a neurological thing. When people commit these acts, something is going on up here that is not clicking. And while someone is getting 5 years and they can get out in 5 years, or probably less for good behavior, our children are scarred for life. They're destroyed for life. Our women are destroyed for life in some form or fashion. Children cannot be responsible for themselves. We as adults have to take that responsibility. The courts, RCIPS, police commissioner, respectfully, all of the money that the government just gave and the last administration gave, please, I know we have a MASH office, I know we have a this office and we have a that office. We need specialized, what do they call it? Special victims unit for these types of cases only. We're not talking about slap on the wrist sentences. We're not talking about probation. We're not talking about suspended sentences. When they do these things, whether it's under the influence or not, we have to hold them accountable. They have to be responsible. We have to set an example and a precedent. We cannot fail our children. We cannot have women spending 20 years afraid to come forward because of who perpetrated the offense. We cannot have women afraid and spend 10 years, 15 years, 7 years, 20 years because they are afraid of who perpetrated against them. They're afraid of shaming their families. They're afraid of their children being ridiculed. They're afraid of not getting employment because Cayman is so small, and there's a stigma attached to these types of things. We have to stand up for women. We have to stand up for children. We have to give stiffer penalties against these types of offenses. We cannot we cannot stand by and see that. You see, I have one viewer on this live, one, and I deliberately wanted to do a live for a reason. But this isn't gossip. This is not gossip. This is not something that people can get online and ridicule and say things online that they can't say to people in public, and talk about people and ridicule someone. Yes, with this particular story I'm talking about, we have to think about certain circumstances, yes, but at the same time, if someone can freely function in life on a day-to-day basis and make certain decisions and choices, they have a right to have the book thrown at them for what they have done in terms of sexual abuse and assault, especially for children under the age of 16 who cannot give consent. They may be present, they may not do anything, but that is not consent. Consent is expressly saying, yes, you can. Yes, I am going to do this with you. That is consent. Women, I want to tell you, do not be afraid or ashamed. Do not wait months and years out of fear, thinking of anyone else except yourself. If you have children of age, you sit down and you talk to those children from the time they can understand, and explain to them about what the Cayman Islands talks about, the birds and the bees, and what life is all about, what could potentially happen to them, what has potentially happened to you. Speak up. Don't worry about what your family is going to think. Don't worry about who in your family is going to be ashamed or going to feel bad. Because at the end of the day, no one has your back but yourself. And you that are responsible for children, at the end of the day, you are responsible for those children. Shame on you. Shame on you making excuses, but you're ridiculing when it happens to somebody else's child. You're talking about the perpetrator. And then if it happens in your household, then you know it has hit close to home. I want to close. It's 22 minutes now. We woke up. Sometimes cabinet has the ability to change laws in cabinet. We woke up. I'm not saying this disrespectfully. You notice I'm not smiling with this topic. We woke up and the laws were changed about the year amount of vehicles that can be brought, the year vehicles, the guidelines for the year's vehicles can be brought in, not to feed the chickens, and there's some other things that I've heard. I'm not slighting the government at all. I respect the government, regardless of which administration it is, and the opposition. But we must be able to do something about this, not because it's our cousin or our uncle or our brother or something that we are afraid to get a sexual offenders list. We must not be afraid, not because it is family or somebody in high position. We must stop failing our children when they become alcoholics, when they become drug dealers or drug users or promiscuous, when they're committing suicide because they have been sexually abused. The churches, let me tell you, pastors and churches, deacons, church members are committing these offenses. Stepfathers, fathers in Cayman, persons in position of trust and responsibility. The penal code, let me pull up the penal code here so I can tell you guys, quick time, what the penal code says about these types of offenses. Because this has got to change, Cayman Islands government. It has got to change. We cannot keep failing our children with these little measly. I'm going to talk like a Cayman, these little measly sentences for these types of offenses. And counseling isn't free in the Cayman Islands. We may say the Cayman Counseling Center and certain other places, but many times people don't want to take their children to these types of counseling centers. And so we fail the children, we fail them. I'm going to go down here, offenses, we don't want about offenses against public order. We're going down here. You see, it's way down to the bottom. Offenses relating to children. Look at child. Oh my God. Listen, these types of offenses should be up to the top of the penal code. These types of offenses, not on page 10. These types of offenses should be up to the top of the penal code. Let's rearrange this penal code. Because offenses, let me tell you something, preliminary punishments for certain, no. We need to get these offenses to the top of this penal code. Let me go down here to tell you what the penal code says about these acts. Again, offenses against children. There's other different laws that pertains to these types of offenses, but I'm just going to the penal code right now. I can't even find it right now. I may have to do another child pornography, sexual communication, abuse of position of trust, inviting a child to participate in a sexual activity, engaging in sexual activity in the presence of a child. Let me tell you something. This is a whole other video I need to do, because this has really just become so, I have so much more I want to say, but let me tell you, I don't need to say anymore, because there's a public outcry. We need to do a demonstration downtown in front of the Parliament, maybe September when they come back to Parliament, about this, because the laws need to change. These social inquiries report, let me tell you, the statistics shows that these offenders are repeat offenders. No amount of imprisonment is going to help them. And we need to know who they are. We need to know if they're going to be living close to us and our children and our women. And that's where a sex offenders list comes in. We talk about we want to be number one in in the financial industry, number one in tourism. What about being number one in protecting the rights of our children and our women, but especially our children? What about being number one in that? Minister Rankin for Social Development, Honorable Premier Ebanks, and Honorable Gary Ruddy for Deputy Premier, Honorable Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Joey Hu, and his Honorable Deputy Leader, Mr. Kenneth Bryan. Where is your voices? You all have children, every one of you, and grandchildren, some of you. What about if this was you guys? We know what would happen, because you're people in power. We cannot continue to have these types of cases over and over and over, but if we do, we need stiffer penalties. You see what we're doing right now, trying to decriminalize certain portions of marijuana so our Caymanians do not be restrained and constricted against getting U.S. visas and going to school and having criminal records and stuff. We need that same kind of energy behind changing the tariffs, changing the sentencing guidelines for sexual abuse and assaults of our children. Because oftentimes too, you know what happens? When we are sexually abused, when children are sexually abused, when when children are sexually abused, especially boys, they grow up to become those types of perpetrators. We have people that are in church and leaders that it's been widely known what they do publicly to children. And that is probably a reason why we can't get a sexual offenders registry today. That is probably why we can't. I'm not saying it is, but let me tell you, a lot of times these things come down to politics, and especially in such a small community as the Cayman Islands, and a small place like the Caribbean. Many Caribbean islands struggle with these sorts of things. Many, many, many. Because people know each other, and they know each other and each other and each other, and they know the politicians. It's too small. We have to change that. We have to think human rights. Children have the right to live and thrive without fear. We must encourage our children to speak up. If we have done it and it has affected or had it done to us, and it has affected us in such a way that our lives are not normal, we have to ensure that that doesn't happen to others, because it becomes a cycle. And who is responsible to do it but you, the general public, and you, the government of the Cayman Islands? When we read these cases in court and these convictions are done, we don't want to hear certain things are taken into consideration. Who made the law that these things are taken into consideration when these are proven facts and it destroys the lives of your constituents' children? Where are you standing there? Voters, when it's time for you to go and vote, you remind your MPs about these situations. It's widely reported. All you all want to do is get online and talk about gossip and everything else, instead of talking about changing. I am going to leave this topic here for this evening and come back to it another day, because we really need to work towards this. We really do.